You said, "I'm fine," again today, and you didn't mean a single word of it. That lie is the most common sentence spoken by people who carry everyone else on their shoulders. It slips out before you even think about it. Your mouth moves faster than your heart can object. Someone at work asked how you were doing this morning. You smiled and said you were great. But you weren't great at all. You were running on empty and pretending the tank was full. You dragged yourself out of bed before the sun came up. You made breakfast for people who barely looked up from their phones. You drove to work in silence, staring at red lights. You sat through meetings where nobody noticed the heaviness in your chest. Then you came home and stood in the kitchen not knowing where to begin. The dishes were piled up and the laundry was waiting. Your back ached and your mind was somewhere far away. But when your partner walked in and asked if everything was okay, you did it again. You put on that familiar mask and said everything was fine. This is not a story about weakness. This is a story about people who love so hard they forget themselves. This is about the ones who pour every drop of water into everyone else's cup. They keep pouring until their own cup is bone dry. They keep smiling until their face hurts from the effort. They keep saying yes until the word loses all meaning. If this sounds like your life, then you need to hear what comes next. Your brain has been protecting you with a survival trick. It is a trick that kept you safe for years. But now that same trick is slowly draining your soul. The good news is that you can change it. You can flip a switch inside your mind. You can learn to be honest without falling apart. You can start with something so small it almost feels silly. But that tiny step will change the direction of your entire life. Let me explain how this works because the science behind it is fascinating. Deep inside your brain there is a small structure. Psychologists call it the amygdala. Think of it as a smoke detector wired into your skull. Its only job is to scan for danger every second of every day. When it senses a threat, it sends an alarm through your whole body. Your heart beats faster, and your muscles tense up. Your palms get sweaty and your stomach tightens. This is the fight or flight response, and it kept our ancestors alive. But here is the problem for people like you. Your smoke detector has been turned up way too high. Years of watching other people's moods trained your brain to treat every small tension as a crisis. A coworker's sigh feels like a personal attack. A family member's silence feels like a storm approaching. Your child's bad mood feels like your failure as a parent. Every tiny shift in the emotional weather around you sets off that alarm. And when the alarm goes off, your brain does something automatic. It calls in the prefrontal cortex, which is like your brain's fire chief. This fire chief has one priority, and that is to keep the peace at all costs. So before you can even process what you are feeling, the fire chief steps in. It slaps a calm expression on your face. It puts the words, "I'm fine," in your mouth. It pushes your real emotions down into a locked room inside your chest. This all happens in a fraction of a second. You don't choose to lie about how you feel. Your brain chooses for you because it learned long ago that honesty was dangerous. Maybe when you were young, showing emotion led to conflict. Maybe crying was met with criticism instead of comfort. Maybe you learned that the only way to keep love was to never be a burden. So your brain built this automatic defense system. It is brilliant in its design but devastating in its long-term effects. Every time you swallow your truth, your brain gets better at hiding it. The mask fits tighter, and the real you gets pushed further down. Eventually you don't even know what you actually feel anymore. You just know that something is missing. There is a hollowness that follows you through the day. It sits with you at dinner and lies next to you at night. You can't name it, but you can feel it in your bones. This is what psychologists call emotional suppression. It is one of the most common defense mechanisms in the human mind. And it is especially common in people who spent decades caring for others. You did not develop this habit because you are broken. You developed it because you are deeply loving. You saw that your calm presence made others feel safe. You noticed that your strength held the family together. You realized that your sacrifice kept the peace at work. So you kept doing it day after day and year after year. You became the rock that everyone leaned on. You became the person who never complained. You became the one they called when everything fell apart. And somewhere along the way you stopped being a person with needs. You became a function and a role and a service. You became invisible in your own life. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Margaret. She spent 30 years being everything to everyone. She raised 3 children mostly on her own. She worked full-time and managed the household without help. She drove her kids to practice and helped with homework every night. She cooked meals from scratch because she believed that was her duty. She attended every school event and never missed a single game. Her neighbors called her a superwoman. Her coworkers said she was the most reliable person they knew. Her children grew up believing that their mother was invincible. Margaret believed it too, or at least she told herself she did. She had a phrase she repeated like a prayer. If I just keep going, everything will be okay. That phrase carried her through 2 decades of exhaustion. It carried her through sleepless nights and thankless mornings. It carried her through moments when she wanted to scream into a pillow. But one ordinary Tuesday afternoon that phrase finally ran out of power. Margaret was at the grocery store picking up ingredients for dinner. She reached for a carton of eggs on the shelf. Her fingers were tired and her grip was weaker than usual. The carton slipped and fell to the floor with a sharp crack. 6 eggs broke open and spread across the white tile. A store employee rushed over and asked if she was all right. Margaret opened her mouth to say her usual line. She was going to say she was fine and offer to clean it up. But the words would not come out. Instead, something broke open inside her just like those eggs. Tears poured down her face without warning or permission. She stood in the middle of that grocery store aisle and sobbed. She cried so hard her whole body shook. She cried for every morning she woke up exhausted. She cried for every evening she cooked when she wanted to collapse. She cried for every time she said she was fine when she was falling apart. She cried for the woman she used to be before she disappeared into her roles. The store employee stood there not knowing what to do. Other shoppers glanced over with confused expressions. Margaret felt embarrassed, but she could not stop the tears. They had been locked inside her for so long that once the door opened there was no closing it. From a neuroscience perspective, what happened to Margaret makes perfect sense. Her brain had been running the suppression program for 30 years. It had been pushing down every honest emotion and replacing it with a smile. But the brain cannot do this forever. It runs on limited energy just like a battery. When that battery finally dies, the emotions come flooding out all at once. Margaret's breakdown in the grocery store was not a sign of weakness. It was her brain sending out a final distress signal. It was screaming that it could not maintain the lie any longer. Those tears were not about the eggs. They were about 3 decades of unspoken pain. They were the accumulated weight of 10,000 moments when she chose silence over honesty. They were the price of being everyone's rock while no one was hers. If you are reading this and you see yourself in Margaret's story, then please listen carefully. You do not have to wait until you shatter in a public place. You do not have to reach the absolute bottom before you start climbing back up. There is a way to release the pressure before it explodes. But first, I want you to understand something important about what happens when you keep saying you are fine for too long. There is a psychological concept called overadaptation. It describes what happens when a person molds themselves so completely to their environment that they lose their own shape. Think of water poured into a container. The water takes the shape of whatever holds it. It has no form of its own. That is what overadaptation does to a human being. You become the shape of your responsibilities. You become the shape of other people's expectations. You become the shape of your job title and your family role. But underneath all of those shapes there is a person. There is someone with dreams and desires and preferences and pain. That person has been waiting quietly in the background for years. Overadaptation feels noble from the outside. People admire you for your selflessness. They praise you for never complaining. They hold you up as an example of strength and grace. But inside you feel like you are fading. The colors of your personality are getting lighter. Your interests feel distant like memories from another life. Your joy feels like something you read about rather than experience. You go through the motions, but the motions feel mechanical. You smile, but the smile does not reach your eyes anymore. This fading is not depression in the clinical sense, though it can lead there. It is something more subtle and more common. It is the slow erosion of self that comes from years of prioritizing everyone else. Psychologists sometimes call it compassion fatigue. It is the exhaustion that comes from giving endlessly without receiving. It is the emptiness that settles in when your emotional reserves are completely spent. Now let me tell you about a man I will call Richard. He worked as a middle manager at a large company for over 20 years. Every day he sat between demanding executives and struggling employees. He absorbed pressure from above and shielded his team from below. When his staff made mistakes, he took the blame. When his bosses made unreasonable demands, he found a way to comply. He never raised his voice and he never pushed back. At home, Richard was the steady presence his family depended on. His partner worried about finances, and he always said they would figure it out. His children came to him with their problems, and he always had an answer. He fixed things around the house on weekends when his body begged for rest. He attended family gatherings with a warm smile even when he was exhausted. Richard was a shield. He positioned himself between the people he loved and the harsh realities of life. He took every hit so they would not have to. But late at night, when the house was quiet, Richard sat alone in the dark. He would pour himself a glass of water and listen to the ice settle. In those silent moments, a terrible emptiness would wash over him. He described it as feeling like he existed everywhere for everyone else but nowhere for himself. He said it felt like his outline was getting thinner, like he was becoming a ghost in his own life. Richard once said something that stayed with me. He said everyone around him seemed to have a place in the world. His partner had her friends and hobbies. His children had their futures and ambitions. His coworkers had their lives outside the office. But when he tried to locate himself in his own life, he could not find anything. There was just a blank space where a person should have been. Richard's experience is textbook emotional depletion. He had spent so many years being strong for others that he had nothing left for himself. His identity had been completely absorbed by his roles. He was a manager and a partner and a father and a provider. But he was no longer Richard. The man behind all those titles had been put on hold for so long that he barely remembered who he was. And here is what I want you to understand about both Margaret and Richard. Their emptiness was not a sign of failure. It was not proof that they were weak or broken or worthless. Their emptiness was actually evidence of how much they had given. You cannot feel depleted unless you had something valuable to give in the first place. You cannot feel empty unless you once were full. The hollowness they felt was the echo of decades of love poured out generously. It was the quiet aftermath of a life spent serving others with everything they had. If you feel that same hollowness right now, I want you to know something. You are not empty. You are not broken. You are not past the point of repair. You are like a marathon runner who just crossed the finish line. You gave everything you had to reach this point. And now that you have stopped running, your body and mind are catching up with the exhaustion. The stillness feels strange because you have been moving for so long. The quiet feels uncomfortable because you are used to the noise of responsibility. But this stillness is not the end of anything. It is the beginning of something new. Think of yourself as a tree in winter. The branches are bare and the leaves have fallen. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. It looks like the tree has given up. But beneath the surface, the roots are working harder than ever. They are drawing nutrients from deep in the earth. They are storing energy for the spring that is coming. Every bare branch is not a sign of death. It is a sign of preparation. The tree knows that it cannot bloom all year round. It knows that rest is not the opposite of growth. Rest is the foundation of growth. You have been trying to bloom in every season of your life. You pushed out flowers in the spring of your career. You pushed out flowers in the summer of raising your children. You pushed out flowers in the autumn of caring for aging parents. And now winter is here and your branches are bare. That is not failure. That is nature. That is the rhythm of a life well lived. Your winter is not permanent. It is a season, and seasons always change. But you have to let winter be winter. You have to stop trying to force blossoms when your roots need rest. You have to give yourself permission to be still. Now let me share the practical part of this, because understanding the problem is only half the journey. The other half is learning what to do about it. There is a concept in psychology called self-compassion. It was studied extensively by researchers who found something remarkable. People who practice self-compassion are not weaker than those who push through pain. They are actually stronger and more resilient in the long run. Self-compassion is not self-pity, and it is not self-indulgence. It is simply treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a dear friend. Imagine your closest friend came to you completely exhausted. She told you she had not slept well in weeks. She said she felt like she was failing at everything. She admitted she had been pretending to be okay. Would you tell her to toughen up and keep going? Of course not. You would hold her hand and tell her she was doing an amazing job. You would tell her that it was okay to rest. You would tell her that asking for help was not weakness but wisdom. Now take those exact words and say them to yourself. Say them out loud if you need to. Tell yourself that you have done enough. Tell yourself that rest is not laziness. Tell yourself that your needs matter just as much as everyone else's. This might feel awkward or even ridiculous at first. That is completely normal. Your brain has spent years programming itself to reject self-care. It will resist the new message like a stubborn old computer rejecting a software update. But if you keep repeating the new message, your brain will eventually accept it. Neural pathways can be rewired at any age. This is not wishful thinking. It is established neuroscience. Every time you choose kindness toward yourself, you strengthen a new pathway. Every time you speak your truth instead of hiding behind a smile, you weaken the old automatic response. It takes time and it takes patience. But the change is real and it is lasting. You do not have to make a dramatic transformation overnight. Start with the smallest possible step. Researchers call this a baby step, and it works because it slips past your brain's resistance. Your brain will fight big changes because big changes feel dangerous. But tiny changes feel safe enough to allow. So here is your first tiny change. The next time someone asks how you are doing, pause for just 1 second before you answer. In that 1 second, check in with yourself. Ask yourself how you actually feel. And then instead of saying you are fine, try adding just one honest word. You might say you are a little tired today. You might say you had a rough morning. You might say you could really use a quiet evening. That is it. That is the whole exercise. One honest phrase mixed into your usual response. It will feel strange and maybe even scary. But something remarkable will happen when you do it. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Dorothy. She was in her 70s and lived alone. She had made independence her entire identity. She never asked anyone for anything. When her knees ached, she walked through the pain. When she struggled with heavy bags, she managed on her own. When neighbors asked how she was, she always said she was wonderful. She said her good health was her greatest blessing. She said it with such conviction that everyone believed her. And because everyone believed her, nobody offered to help. Over time, the visits grew less frequent. The phone calls became shorter. People assumed Dorothy was thriving on her own. She had built such a convincing wall of strength that no one thought to look behind it. One evening, Dorothy was sitting on a park bench resting after a walk to the store. A woman she knew from the neighborhood passed by and asked if she was okay. Dorothy felt the familiar script rising in her throat. She was about to deliver her usual cheerful response. But her legs were aching badly that day. Her bags felt heavier than usual. And she was so tired of performing. So instead of her usual line, she said something different. She said she was a little worn out because her legs had been bothering her. She said the walk to the store felt longer than it used to. It was such a small admission. Just a crack in the wall. But the effect was immediate and beautiful. Her neighbor's face softened with recognition. She sat down next to Dorothy and said she had the same problem. She said her knees had been terrible lately. She said she had been too proud to mention it to anyone. The two women sat on that bench and talked for over an hour. They shared their aches and their worries and their loneliness. They laughed about getting older. They made plans to walk to the store together the following week. Dorothy told me later that it felt like warm water flowing through a crack in a dam. She said that one small moment of honesty brought more connection than years of pretending ever had. That is the power of a baby step. That is what happens when you let one tiny truth escape from behind the wall. The people around you are not waiting for you to be perfect. They are waiting for you to be real. Your vulnerability is not a burden to others. It is actually a gift. When you show someone that you are human, you give them permission to be human too. When you admit that you are struggling, you open a door that they might have been afraid to open themselves. Connection does not grow from strength. Connection grows from shared honesty. Every time you let someone see the real you, a signal goes to your brain. That signal says this person showed their truth, and the world did not end. Your amygdala registers this as evidence that honesty is safe. Over time, the alarm system starts to calm down. The fire chief in your prefrontal cortex relaxes a little. The automatic mask response becomes less immediate. You start to feel a space between the question and your answer. In that space, you have a choice. You can choose the old script, or you can choose something new. That space is freedom. That space is where healing begins. I want to be clear that this is not about dumping all of your pain on everyone you meet. It is not about becoming a person who complains constantly. It is about finding a healthy middle ground between total suppression and total exposure. It is about learning that you can share a piece of your truth without losing control. You have spent your whole life believing that your value comes from what you do for others. You believed that your worth was measured by how much you could carry. You believed that setting down the weight would make you less valuable. But that belief was never true. Your value does not come from your productivity. Your value does not come from your usefulness. Your value comes from your existence. You matter because you are here. You matter because you are alive. You matter because there is no one else exactly like you. The roles you played were important, and the love you gave was real. But those things were expressions of your value, not the source of it. Even if you never cooked another meal or solved another problem or held another person together, you would still be worthy of love and rest and joy. There is a phrase that many people your age grew up hearing. It is about knowing your place and being content with what you have. That kind of wisdom has its place. But if that phrase has become a chain that keeps you from honoring your own needs, then it is time to loosen it. You have given more than enough. You have been patient beyond reason. You have been generous beyond measure. It is not selfish to finally turn some of that generosity inward. It is necessary. It is overdue. It is the most important thing you can do right now. The next time someone asks if you are okay, and you feel that automatic smile forming on your face, try something new. Before you answer, take a breath. Put your hand on your chest if you can. Feel the warmth of your own heartbeat. And then quietly in your mind say these words to yourself. It is okay to not be okay. That simple sentence is more powerful than you might think. It gives your brain permission to stand down. It tells your internal fire chief that the emergency is over. It creates room for your real feelings to surface at their own pace. You do not have to cry. You do not have to confess everything. You just have to acknowledge to yourself that the mask is a mask. That acknowledgement alone begins to change everything. Your life has been a long, and sometimes difficult journey. You walked roads that most people will never understand. You carried weights that would have broken someone less determined. You showed up every single day, even when showing up was the hardest thing in the world. And you did it all with a smile. That smile was your armor and your gift and your sacrifice all at once. But the season of carrying is drawing to a close. The people you nurtured are finding their own way now. The responsibilities that once filled every hour are slowly shifting. And in their place is a quiet space that might feel unfamiliar. That quiet space is not emptiness. It is possibility. It is a blank canvas waiting for your colors. You spent decades painting everyone else's world in beautiful shades. Now it is time to pick up the brush for yourself. It does not matter that you are not sure what colors you want. It does not matter that your hand might shake a little. What matters is that you begin. Start with one small stroke of honesty. Add a touch of rest where there used to be obligation. Blend in a moment of joy that belongs only to you. Day by day the canvas will fill with something new. It will not look like anyone else's painting, and that is exactly the point. Your brain can build new pathways at any stage of life. This is not a motivational slogan. It is a scientific fact. Every new choice you make creates a new neural connection. Every time you choose yourself, you strengthen a road that leads to peace. The old roads of self-sacrifice will always be there, but they will grow quieter as the new roads become stronger. You are not starting over. You are starting from a place of incredible experience and depth. Everything you learned while caring for others is still inside you. The empathy and the patience and the strength are all still there. The only difference now is that those gifts are finally pointed in your direction. The night has been long, but morning is closer than you think. You can already feel it in the way your heart responded to these words. Something stirred inside you as you read this. That stirring is your real self waking up after a very long sleep. Do not rush it. Let it happen gently and naturally. Tomorrow, when you open your eyes, place your hand over your heart. Feel the steady beat beneath your palm. That rhythm has carried you through every storm and every sacrifice. It has never stopped, and it never will. That heartbeat is proof that you are still here. It is proof that your story is not over. It is proof that you deserve every good thing that is waiting for you. You have done so well. You have given so much. And now your new season is beginning. It is already growing right beneath your feet like the first green shoots of spring pushing through the last patches of snow. You do not have to be fine anymore. You just have to be you. And that has always been more than enough.